Likutei Halachot 5:12 Yud Bet. Ve'al ken haya ikar yitziat Mitzrayim b'chatzot. The main time of leaving Mitzrayim, the Exodus, was at midnight, meaning specifically then, not another time. K'moshe katuv sham, like it says there in Shemot 11, Kach chatzot halayla ani yotze betoch Mitzrayim. That Moshe Rabbeinu was quoting from Hashem and saying, around midnight, I'm going to go out into Mitzrayim and kill all the firstborn. Ki ikar yitzat Mitzrayim, because the main idea of Yitzat Mitzrayim, haya al yedei mateh Moshe v'Haron, was about the stick or the staff of Moshe and Aharon. That was the main thing that Moshe used and Aharon in bringing the plagues and showing Paro who's boss. Shehem b'chinat tefillah b'chinat din. That stick has to do with the idea of tefillah in a din way, like we were talking about. Because again, it's like harsh using a stick. Bechinat ve'ashlech lifnei Paro yihi tanin. Like when Moshe had to throw the stick by Paro and it turned into a nachash, into a snake. It was all to teach that kanal. Al ken haya ikar yitziat Mitzrayim b'chatzot halayla. That's why the idea of Yitzat Mitzrayim has to be at midnight. Ki az me'orer koach ha-tefillah b'bchinat din kanal. Because that's when we awaken the power of the tefillah, of the judgment type of prayer. So even though Moshe, when he was throwing the stick at Paro, he did it physically, it was also an allusion to that he's throwing prayer of justice to Hashem about Paro. I mean, again, to destroy the enemies, which is Paro and Mitzrayim. So those two ideas go together. V'zeh shamru Rabbeinu Zal. This is what the rabbis say in Berachot, page 3. Mechedi, Moshe lo yada chatzot emat, David heche yada. We see if Moshe didn't know when midnight was, because he said around midnight, kach chatzot. So how could David know? This is the famous Gemara, like we say. Now, there's two opinions, of course, that Moshe did not know when Chatzot was, but then they say he really did. But since the Talmud brings both versions of it, we can learn from both things. So going with the idea that Moshe did not know, that's what Rav Natan Zal is going to be playing with and explaining. Of course, at the end, we might say that he did know, but it's to teach another idea. Ella, David simana havele. David knew when midnight was, even though Moshe might not have, because he had a sign. Ki kinor haya talui lemala mimiktato shel David. Because again, like the Gemara says, he had the harp that was hovered over his bed like an alarm clock, and when it turned midnight, it would play. We'll see how it played, because it had the northern wind, but we'll get to that here too. Ki bimei Moshe adain lo nishlam b'shleimut hatikun shel hatefillah b'bchinat din hanal. So he explains now, the rabbi, in the time of Moshe, we still did not complete the complete tikkun of the idea of praying for justice, which means when the justice really comes to the goyim, it's going to be Yemot HaMashiach. And being that we never got Yemot HaMashiach with Moshe's time, so we never reached that completeness. Ve'al ken haya adain acharei hagalut. That's why we had an exile even after Moshe, meaning until even today. It wasn't the end. Ve'al ken lo haya yodeya adain lechaven hetev bechinat chatzot emat. So that's what it means that Moshe did not know how to calculate midnight. It means he did not know, and it was not known yet, meaning to be able to make that idea of chatzot and to destroy the enemies and bring the geula, meaning he never did that. So in that sense, he didn't have a mastery on the idea of chatzot. Shenimshach me'tefillah hanal, kanal, like it draws and comes from that tefillah of din. Aval David hu Mashiach. But David is another story, because he is Mashiach. Now David himself, he also didn't bring the Geulah. But we're saying that David is going to come back as the Mashiach. It's the same soul. Like we say, Adam stands for Aleph Dalid Mem. It's Adam, David, and Mashiach. It's all the same soul. That's why Adam gave David some years of his life, the 70 years, because it was his own mistake that he's going to correct. And that's why he didn't sleep, because Adam brought death into the world. So David made it his business that he's going to take death away by not letting death overcome him by sleep, which is the 60th of death, and thereby, in a way, conquering death for the world. And what does Mashiach do? He also destroys the Satan and conquers death. So it's all the same inyan. So even though the Mashiach, of course, will bring us to the Shleimut, but since David, even in David's time, in history, even though he also didn't bring the Geulah like Moshe did not, since he represents the Mashiach, so he had an added benefit, and we acknowledge him as though he did know when Chatzot was, because he's going to be the one, after all, later on, who's going to bring the Geulah. So that's the logic of David. Shehu yizkeh lezot tefillah b'tachlit hashlemut. He was worthy of this tefillah in its completed way. That he's going to bring the final Geulah and no galut, no exile after it. Shezehu bechinat, like it says in Tehillim, Memhei, which is about the Mashiach. Chagor charbecha al yarech gibor. It says, gird or wear like a belt your sword on your thigh, you warrior, you strong one, which means he knows how to fight the fight of Din and be a gibor. Ad, until it says, Amim tachtecha yipelu belev oyebe hamelech, that the nations will fall under you and you will pierce them in their hearts, these enemies of the king. V'chena pasuk, and another pasuk, Mateh uzecha yishlach Hashem et Zion. This mateh, the stick, which we said, the stick which is of justice, of oz, of might, yishlach, you will send Hashem from Zion. Shemevi sham behatorah hanal le'inyan tefillah hanal. Like it says in the Likutei Maharan that we quoted earlier, which is about this idea of tefillah, which is of tefillah of din, has to do with this stick again, the staff. Ne'emar ikaro al David Mashiach, which is again said primarily on David, who is the soul of the Mashiach. She'alav ne'emar, that of him it says, Ne'um Hashem ladoni, Hashem said, Shev limini, he told David, sit to my right, ad ashit oyebecha hadom leraglecha, until I will put your enemies as my footstool. Mateh uzecha, and again the staff of might, which means that's what's going to be used. Ki hu yigmor ha-geulah b'shlemut, because David is the one who's going to complete the Geulah in a shelema way. Ki hu yoshev limin Hashem itbarach, because he's going to sit at the right of Hashem, so to speak, ad yashit oyevav hadom leraglav, until Hashem is going to place the enemies as his footstool, which means we're going to conquer them, or Hashem is going to conquer them. Ve'al ken David hisig zeman chatzot. That's why David, he was able to know when chatzot was. Shehu mitorer al yedei tefillah hanal kanal, because he's awakened through this tefillah, meaning he knows how to make this tefillah and how to bring the Geulah by bringing this judgment from Hashem to the enemies. Vezehu be'atzmo masha amru sham, and that's why it says about it, David kinor haya telui lemala mimitato. David had the harp which was over his head. Vekevan she'egia chatzot laila, when the midnight came, ruach sefonit, the northern wind, minashevet bo, would play on it, on the strings of the harp. V'hayam and again me'elav, and it would play on its own. So it played and it woke him up. It was an alarm clock of midnight. It was placed right where the northern wind would hit it. Hainu, because the northern wind comes at midnight, they say. Hainu bechinat hanigun haniflam v'vuar sham. And here we have the idea of, again, the song. We said Shir Chadash in the time of Mashiach. So that's why he has a kinor playing, the song playing at midnight, to show that it's also part of that. He's going to be merited to bring the Geula, which is about Shir Chadash. Shehu nimshach al yidei tefillah hanal, which is drawn again from this tefillah of din, kemoshe katuv sham, like we said. Ve'al ken hu mit'orer al yidei ruach sifonit daika. That's why he's being awoken from this northern wind specifically. Shehu bechinat givurot, because the northern wind has to do with givurot, strength or might. Now usually the left is givurah, so why are we saying the north is givurah, which is up? Because the kotel, Beit HaMikdash, the Aron, the ark was in the west, because we have the western wall, and towards the west is where that was. So then the north would be to the left of that, meaning. So it's really in the left side, if you want to look at it that way. That's why the north is considered the left, which is Givurah. Shehu bechinat Givurot, bechinat tefillah, bechinat din, which is again the aspect of the tefillah in a judgment way. Umisham haya yodea David chatzot emat. That's how David knew when chatzot was, because of his alarm clock. Ki ikar bechinat chatzot, shu bechinat hitorut hashena, because the main idea of chatzot again is to wake up from the sleep. Shehi bechinat geula, which is again to get into the geula time, which is when we wake up. Daytime, we said night is like the galut, and waking up is like the geula. So that's why he would wake up with the harp, and it's like he's entering the geula time. Ki ha-galut nekra shena, because the exile is considered like sleep, is called sleep, cheshchat laila, the dark of night. The geula nekrat orut hashena, and the geula is called waking up from that sleep. Kemoshe katuv vayikatz ki yashen Hashem, like it says that Hashem will get up as though he was sleeping, and he's going to get up and destroy the enemies, and that's going to be when the geula does happen. So just to show, sleeping and waking up has that idea. Now just to know, some say, of course, David did know when Chatzot was, just like Moshe really knew. So they say, why did he need then the kinor? So it wasn't really to wake him up because he didn't know when Chatzot was. It was just to wake him up. He was going to sleep in his own way of under a half hour, however it was, without sleeping really. But he dozed off. So in order to wake him up, he needed that alarm clock, not so much to tell him what time it was. That's just again how they explained it in the Gemara. Kol ze nimshach al yedei ha-tefillah bebchinat din hanal. All this is coming out from this tefillah of justice. Shezeh ha-koach mitorer b'chatzot laila kanal. Because this koach, this force, strength, is being awoken up at midnight. Like we said, shemisham mitorer kol hanigun hanal bekinor shel David. That from this, it's being aroused, the song that's coming from the kinor, the harp of David. Al yidei ruach sifonit daika, from this northern wind. And by the way, sifonit is also safun, like we say, we hide the afikoman. Safun is to be hidden, and that's the hidden light of Mashiach. So it's also an allusion to that. And the word ruach has to do with Mashiach, because we say ve'ruach Elokim merachefet al pnei hamayim in Bereshit, and they say this is rucho shel Mashiach. So these two words, ruach sifonit, is also very messianic. Ve'al ken al yedei zeh davka haya yodeya chatzot emat. That's how he knew exactly when chatzot was. V'haya kam ve'osek b'Torah, and he would wake up or get up. Maybe he was not sleeping so much, meaning he would get up, ve'osek b'Torah, and learn Torah, ki hakol bechina achat kanal, because it's all one idea, like we said. So even learning Torah, it's like he woke up and entered Yemot HaMashiach, and there's song, and he learned Torah, because we said in Mashiach's time, the world is going to be filled with the knowledge of Hashem and learning Torah. So he was imitating being in Yemot HaMashiach. So his whole exercise of the night and into the morning was like a little capsule of what's going to be in Yemot HaMashiach.